my kitchen. I am super excited because tonight we are going to be making German schnitzel. Schnitzel is one of my favorite recipes to make and is by far one of my favorite German foods. Now, schnitzel may sound really difficult to make, but it's actually pretty simple, and the ingredients you need are really minimal. So it's perfect for people who are just starting but want to try something that seems a little fancier or seems a little harder, and nobody needs to know how easy it was for you to make. But before we get started, I want to thank my bestie Tawny for sending me this camera stand, because now I can film professionally. Well, it'll look more professional, at least, without having to like hold my phone and try to cook. And it's great with schnitzel because your hands get super, super dirty. Like really cakey with flour and eggs and stuff. For those of you who don't know what schnitzel is, it's pork tenderloin or veal, or, you know, it's a variation of meats. I think usually in Germany they use veal, but we're gonna be using a pork tenderloin. And it's pounded out, so it's super thin, and then you coat it in egg and flour and breadcrumbs, and you fry it in a pan. So it's this super crispy, thin piece of pork tenderloin or veal. It's delicious. You squeeze a little lemon over it. It's amazing. Now, tonight I'll be doing pork schnitzel, but in addition, I'll be making a mushroom sauce that is traditionally called, and that with the pork schnitzel is called Jägerschnitzel. Now, Jägerschnitzel means hunter's schnitzel, and hunter's schnitzel is basically just a schnitzel with like a vegetable sauce. And so I've traditionally, and even in Germany, had it with mushrooms. I have this super cool German cookbook that my grandmother, my Oma, gave to me. It's from the 60s. So there's not fun pictures or anything like there used to be. Now, this Jägerschnitzel in here calls for carrots and some other vegetables, but I have mushrooms and I love mushrooms on mine, so we'll be using mushrooms today. If you want to just do this recipe, just the schnitzel by itself, that's great, super easy. If you want to get a little fancier, try to really like hone some of those skills in the kitchen, stay tuned and follow through with the Jägerschnitzel recipe. It'll be awesome. Okay, let's get started. I'm gonna go ahead and just give you a little bit of an overview of what you usually need to make schnitzel. Excuse the stuff in the background. For the sauce, we will be using just like a cheap white wine. For cooking, I just used boxed wine. I never drink boxed wine, but for cooking, I just do that. We don't need this remote in there. Then additionally for the sauce, you're gonna need an onion, butter, mushrooms, or a veggie of your choice like carrots, and flour. I don't have white flour right now, so we'll just be using whole wheat organic flour. That's fine. You can use whatever kind of flour you want. Now for the actual schnitzel, you're gonna want some pepper, some salt, breadcrumbs, some seasonings of your choice. I will be using Penzeys Bavarian seasoning and some paprika, flour again, and an egg or two beaten. And then, of course, the pork tenderloin, which I will put in right here, showing you how to cut that, how to clean it, how to cut it, and we'll be good to go. So when you are preparing your pork loin to make schnitzel, you want to take off all of the fat, or as much of the fat as you can. And then there's this like thin layer, you can see when I pull it up, of like extra tissue that's usually connected to the fat that you also want to take off. So if you pull this or cut this the wrong way, the pork will start to separate. I don't know if you can see that, but it's separating a little bit. So you want to make sure to not pull too hard and to pull in the right direction so that you're not tearing the pork apart. I am not perfect at this, so it's not gonna look like a professional did it, but you can kind of get a little bit peeled back, and then you can just take a knife and you can just push the knife gently along to separate it from the meat. You want to keep the tip up a little bit so that the tip doesn't go into the pork, because you're not trying to cut the pork. You're just trying to pull this sinew. I'm not sure if this is actually sinew, but this layer back. Sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes it's really hard. So, and this is a pretty long process. I think this is the hardest part of making schnitzel. I have made schnitzel without doing this. It's just not as tender, and you should really try to clean it before. This also isn't the fattiest tenderloin I've ever had. I've had it where there's just like a ton of fat before. So we can just get some of this. And I am not perfect. Again, like there's, you know, it's not going to be the best work. You could probably find a professional video on how to do this, but this is just me doing it. This is also only half a pork loin because I'm only cooking for 2 people, so I didn't need the whole one. But see, you can like kind of start pulling this back. Also, getting rid of this fat and this outer layer of tissue just helps when you try to pound it out. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cleaned my pork loin the best that I could. And now I'm going to take a sharp knife and I'm going to start cutting the pork loin at a diagonal. And these will be the pieces that you end up pounding with a hammer or the back of a, like a meat hammer or the back of a frying pan to get thin. So I'm just doing this about like an inch, half an inch thick. It sort of looks like this shape, a little oval. When I cut, I curl my fingers under my hand so that when I'm cutting and the knife is close to them, I don't chop the tip of my fingers because that's really easy to do. I'll cut right up against my knuckle. The knife will just go right there if it happens to touch my finger. Okay, so now I have cut all my pork into pieces that look like this. And then we're going to pound them out. Okay guys, so you can't see my face, but what's important is that you can see the cutting board. Here I have a cutting board laid out and I've put a piece of saran wrap over it. And then I'm going to take my pieces of pork, which I've already chopped into these little oval pieces. There's a name for that, but I don't remember what it's called. And then on top of that, I just do one at a time. I'm gonna take another piece of saran wrap and I'm going to lay it over the piece of meat. Okay, this is where this meal is perfect if you've had a really long day and you just wanna get some frustration out. Like you couldn't go to the gym, so you need something to do, or to like just get that anger out, or you know, somebody's upset you. I don't know, you can just go ahead, get all of your frustration out on this. I had a really long 24 hours, the past 24 hours, lots of car trouble. It was really frustrating, so this will be good. What I do, I have a meat hammer, this pretty little tool right here, and it's a meat tenderizer, really, and it tenderizes the meat. It pushes it out, flattens it, So I'm gonna use this. However, I only got this a couple weeks ago. What I used before then was a frying pan. I literally just like hit the meat with a frying pan. So I'm gonna use this meat tenderizer, and your meat's covered, and you're just gonna pound it out. And basically what happens when you do this is it spreads out, it becomes thin. You can like really go at it. You probably want it 1/4 of an inch thick. I'm gonna be honest, mine is probably gonna be a little more thin than that because when I cut it, it was a little more thin. But it'll be good. Maybe even 1/8 of an inch, honestly. It just depends on how thick you want it. But you don't want it to be like 1 inch. You want it to be pretty thin. And having the saran wrap over it helps so that the meat doesn't stick on the cutting board or your whatever you're using to tenderize it. Yeah, just make sure it's even. And the pork cooks really fast because it's so thin, so that's pretty nice. Okay, then you just find the 2 separate pieces somewhere, and voila, you have your first piece of schnitzel almost ready to go. It needs to be, we need to add some goodness to it first though. But I'm just gonna put this on another plate and then get to the rest of them. Okay, so now our pork is tenderized. It's nice and thin. It's pretty flat laid out there. It looks good. It looks good to go for seasoning. So what you're going to want for this step are 3 bowls. I'm using 2 pie trays because they're pretty shallow, and using shallow bowls for this is easier. And then I don't have a 3rd pie tray, so just a normal bowl. And we're going to need our egg, our flour, our breadcrumbs, and our different seasonings. What you're gonna do is just whisk an egg in one of the bowls. I just whisk my eggs with a fork. And you may need 2 eggs, maybe 3, depending on how much you're making. This is not a ton of schnitzel, so I'm probably gonna need 2 eggs for this. But I'm just gonna whisk this egg. Let me get the 2nd egg. Okay. Whisk the 2nd egg in there with the 1st egg in one of the bowls. And then in another one of the bowls or baking trays, you're gonna take your flour. I'm gonna put, let's see how much flour we're gonna put in. This isn't a ton of schnitzel, so I'm just gonna eyeball real quick, but I'll let you know how much flour I put in. I'm just gonna put 1.5 cups of flour in. And then, there it is, the flour's in the tray. I'm gonna add salt. I'm going to put a teaspoon of salt in here. That may be a lot. I'm gonna put 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to take my Bavarian seasoning from Penzeys spices because Penzeys, again, is the best. I'm basically just promoting Penzeys on this channel, let's be real. But Bavarian blend, Bavarian seasoning is, it says it's brown mustard, rosemary, garlic, thyme, bay leaves, and sage. So if you don't have this, you can just add some of those. Usually if you just want to do salt and pepper, that's totally fine because that's also delicious. I'm gonna take a teaspoon of this Bavarian seasoning and sprinkle it into my flour. You can add as much seasoning to the flour as you want or as little as you want. It really just depends on your taste buds, depends on what you like, what you don't like, so, okay. That, and then I'm also gonna add a little bit of paprika. And for that, I'm just going to add like 1/4 teaspoon. I can get this open. Again, salt and pepper and that alone is just fine if that's what you want. I am not here to tell you how to season your food. I kind of am because it's a cooking show, but if you don't want to do it, I'm not gonna. This is just what I do. And I change it up. Every time I make this, I put in different spices depending on what I want. Now we're gonna do some pepper. I'm gonna do about a teaspoon of pepper. And then that should be good. But we want this to be mixed. So I'm just gonna take a fork, just gonna mix it around, get all the seasonings evenly dispersed throughout the flour. Okay, that looks good. And then in the third and final bowl or baking dish, you're gonna take your breadcrumbs and you're gonna pour out about a cup and a half, depending on how much pork you have, like a cup and a half of breadcrumbs. These breadcrumbs are not plain. These are actually Italian style breadcrumbs. You can use plain breadcrumbs. You can use breadcrumbs. You can use plain breadcrumbs. Oh my gosh. You can use seasoned breadcrumbs. It doesn't matter. You can also use panko. That makes it super, super crispy, but I prefer breadcrumbs because it's like traditional. And I think panko is almost like sharp. Last time I made it with panko, it was like, it cut my mouth up. So maybe I just put too much panko on it. Who knows? Okay, so at this point, before you start frying up your schnitzel, you're going to want to set your oven to the lowest possible setting, or if it just has like a warming setting just to keep things warm, do that. Because once we fry the schnitzel, we're gonna put it in the oven to keep it warm. I think my lowest setting is 175 degrees, so that's just what I have it at. It's not gonna be in there too long, so it's not gonna like cook anything, plus 175 is pretty low. But again, if you have just like a warming setting, do that. We're also going to want to start heating up our handy dandy skillet. I'm using my skillet because I love my skillet. If you don't have a skillet, that's okay. You can use like any frying pan, but here's my skillet. It's probably one of my top 2 favorite tools in the kitchen. My other favorite tool in the kitchen is this garlic press. And it used to be my grandma's when my mom was a kid in like the 70s and 80s, and yeah. And then my mom had it, and my mom just gifted it to me, so I'm super excited about it because I grew up with this and she grew up with this, and it's something really dorky to like be super excited about a garlic press, but I am super excited about this garlic press. So that and my skillet, like my 2 best friends in the kitchen, because chopping garlic, not fun. I don't know if you've ever done that. It's not fun. It's just like, it just takes a long time. It's just small, you know, better things to be doing. If you don't have one, you can always chop your garlic. That's okay. But here's my skillet. I love it. And I will be putting that on medium high to heat up. I let my skillet warm up, and then I put the oil in so that the skillet's already hot when the oil goes in. So we'll see you when the skillet's hot. Okay guys, my skillet is hot and ready to go. I have my oven fan on. So I'm gonna pour about 3 tablespoons of canola oil into the skillet. And the skillet is starting to smoke, so it's definitely hot. Remember, if you're cooking with a cast iron skillet, it gets really hot, including the handle. So use an oven mitt. And I just wanna make sure that's evenly poured out. I might use a little bit more oil, but you don't want it to be drenched in oil. You just want like a thin layer of oil to fry in. And then I have my setup here next to the stove because I'm about to dip the meat into all of these things and then put it directly into the skillet. So I wanted to have it easy access nearby. Let's go. Okay, there's no great angle for the camera right now. But what we're gonna do, the oil is hot. I have my tongs so I don't have to put my hand near the oil. And I'm just gonna take one of my pieces of schnitzel. I'm gonna dredge it in the flour so I get some nice seasoning. And then I'm going to put it in the egg and cover it with the egg. And then I'm gonna come over here to the breadcrumbs and I'm gonna cover it in breadcrumbs. Now, what some people do when they make this, because your fingers start to like form, you see, they get sticky and everything sticks to them. They have like a dry hand and a wet hand, so this hand will be the dry hand, for example, and you do flour with this hand's a wet hand, egg, and then flour so that your stuff doesn't stick to your fingers, but I always forget, and so I just do it like this. And then I'm gonna come over to my hot oil, and I'm just gonna put the schnitzel in, and I'm just gonna flip it about halfway through so that both sides are golden brown. And it doesn't take very long, probably like 2 minutes on each side. But let me triple check that. Just let me see what happens here. Might be 3 minutes on each side. But they're really thin, so they cook super fast. As soon as this one's done, I'll let you know. I also have this baking sheet lined with tin foil and then tin foil to go over. And when I put the schnitzels in the oven to keep them warm, I'm just gonna put them on this and then this on top of it. Oh yeah, it's literally like, it happens super quickly. This is a bad angle, but if you can see, the schnitzel is a nice golden brown, so I'm gonna flip it. That was probably only a minute, so. And then I'm just gonna continue this process until all of the schnitzel are done. Each time one of them gets done, I'm putting it in the oven on that baking sheet so it keeps warm. Okay, so the fan is really loud, but just so I give you another angle for this, you take your piece of meat, I'm gonna cover it in your flour. Remember, that's where like all the seasoning is. You can also put seasoning in your breadcrumbs. I do that too, but and then you come over to your egg. You want to make sure you get some good egg on there, because the egg's what's going to stick the breadcrumbs to it. And then come over to your breadcrumbs, pat it down. And then go ahead and add it to your skillet. I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. When you're cooking, you can leave it at medium. It doesn't have to be medium high, otherwise it'll burn, like the oil's starting to burn here. So I'm going to be putting more oil in, and this one should be done soon. So after that last one was finished, I added more oil. It's not smoking anymore. You want to make sure your oil's fresh, and nothing in it's burning. This one's looking good. Let it go a little bit longer. Flip it. Look at that. Okay. So a quick tip I just want to mention to everybody is that when you're putting anything in hot oil, you want to lay it down like away from you. That way when things splash up, they don't splash up right on you. If I had laid it down this way, it would have splashed up on me. I forget to, so that's fine. But just remember, like, lay things in the hot oil away from you. Okay, everyone, for those of you who just want the schnitzel and not the Jägerschnitzel, this is where the video ends. Here, you have some beautiful, 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 and delicious, crispy pieces of schnitzel. Now, for those of you who want to continue on to the Jägerschnitzel, I am getting to the sauce in just a sec. Okay guys, welcome to the Jägerschnitzel part of this video. We're finally getting to the delicious mushroom sauce. I've dumped the oil out of my cast iron, and I'm going to be putting some butter in there to start the sauce. I've actually never done this sauce before, but I am getting it from this cookbook, this German cookbook that my Oma gave me. And So I'm gonna be following some recipes right here, just like you'll hopefully follow my recipes. It's funny because this recipe doesn't give any measurements or anything, so I'm just gonna do what I think, and we're gonna see how it goes. But I think it'll be really good. To start off, I'm gonna just saute the mushrooms in some butter. So I think I'm gonna do 2 tablespoons of butter, and I'm gonna heat that up in the cast iron. I'm gonna throw my mushrooms in and saute those bad boys. So let's get started. So right now, I just have my cast iron on some medium-low heat. Pretty low. It's still really hot from when I did the schnitzel. All I did was pour out the oil. I didn't actually clean the cast iron because I want those flavors from the schnitzel in the sauce. So I have 2 tablespoons of butter melted in here. I have chopped up my mushrooms and cleaned them. And I'm just gonna pour them in. Careful, don't let it splatter on you, that'll be hot. And then I'm just gonna saute these in some butter for like a couple minutes, probably 2 minutes, we'll see. Mushrooms don't actually need to be cooked that long. And we're just sauteing here. Now, the recipe in my Oma's book, well, she didn't write it, but the book my Oma gave me, does say to put the veal in the pan and then continue making the sauce. But this is a pretty small cast iron, and I like my veal my pork Jägerschnitzel, my pork schnitzel really crispy. And so I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna make the sauce in here and then pour it over the top of the schnitzel to make Jägerschnitzel. Now that they've been sauteing for about a minute or 2, I'm gonna add another tablespoon of butter. I know this is like a lot of butter, but it's delicious, so we can go ahead and do that. And then once the butter is melted and bubbly, so we want all this butter melted, I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of flour, just to get it a little thicker. So in go my 2 tablespoons of flour. Again, I'm just using whole wheat flour because I don't have white flour at the moment, but use whatever kind of flour you want. I'm gonna mix this up. And then, after this, I'm going to let this just like saute a little bit, just cook a little bit for another couple minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And then I'm gonna put in some white wine and water. The mushroom flour mixture has been sauteing for a couple minutes, probably 3 minutes. Since I didn't put the schnitzel in, I don't think it has to be 5 minutes. And now I'm going to add 1 cup of white wine. If you don't want to use white wine, you can also use water. That's totally fine. You could probably also use like chicken stock, beef stock, something like that. But I will be using white wine. We're just going to stir this around. And then I'm going to cover this. I'm going to crank up the heat a little bit so it gets to simmering. And simmering is when it's like just bubbling a little bit, just sort of moving around a little bit. And then I'm going to cover it and I'm going to let it cook for about 15 minutes so it thickens up. Okay, everyone, so you can see that this is pretty thick. I really only had it on there for like 6 minutes maybe, not the 15 like I thought, but I stirred it occasionally so it wouldn't stick to the bottom, nice and thick. You can season it however you want. I think it tastes delicious this way, so I'm just gonna leave it like this, but you can add salt, pepper, whatever you think it needs. Over here, I have my schnitzel out of the oven, ready to be plated. Doesn't that look gorgeous? Oh my goodness. I actually think this may be the best schnitzel I've ever made. And then a platter for the schnitzel. So I'll just show you how I plate it. gonna take my schnitzel, lay it. Apparently, it is also National Schnitzel Day today, which I actually didn't know before making this video. But my boyfriend's mom just texted me about it because she knew I was making schnitzel. So that's pretty cool, I would say. Oh my goodness. Look at this yumminess, you guys. Look at that. This one's that one's a little burnt. That's okay. I don't know what that voice was. That was like a baby voice, but we're just gonna make this all nice and pretty. There we go. And then I'm gonna pour the sauce. Wow, look at this beauty. Some delicious, perfectly crisp Jägerschnitzel. Okay everyone, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy making the schnitzel or Jägerschnitzel, whatever you decide, whether it's your first time or your 1000th time. I hope you maybe learned something new or saw a different variation than what you've seen before, or, you know, I don't know, just explored a new thing in the kitchen. Let me know in the comments here on my Instagram page, Kitchen of Sauce, SAS, not S-A-U-C-E. I'm not a good speller, I'm just gonna be honest. Anyway, Kitchen of Sauce, SAS, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks so much.
Make sure to like and subscribe.